Could you please join me in welcoming Eric Hipple?
All right. How are you? Good? Yeah. I know the table back there is having a great time. Yeah, let's go Lions. Yes, yeah, great year, huh? Yeah. Hey, well, I had some pretty good years too. Just remember that. Yeah, went to the playoffs twice. Won the division 1 year. Okay. Right. No, actually, I can't remember exact timing was, but I met Denise over at a function. And she started telling me about Love Inc. and what you all do and stuff. And I think, what a great mission. I mean, because anybody at any time, at any place, could be in trouble. You just don't know who they're going to be. And so when we try and categorize and stigma, because sometimes we think what that might be. But I also like the idea, or love the idea actually, that it's not a permanent fix. We're here to help. So we're a partner with you. And so that means you've got to help yourself as well. So you've got to pick yourself up and do what you can as well. So it doesn't become an entitlement. And I think that is just fantastic. And I actually think that's probably how most charities should be done. So thank you for what you do for everyone. And of course, there's mental health, the area that I fit into and talk about and had experience with. Certainly, there's those that suffer and have breakdowns and have trouble and need because of their mental health issues. And mental health in itself, when something does go wrong, you think about usually it's around some sort of change. Some sort of change has happened, some sort of transition has happened to where somebody that normally might be okay, and all of a sudden you pull the wheels off underneath them. In other words, the things that keep us healthy and the things that keep us, stress-free oftentimes are, predictability when things are predictable, so they're not thrown off. Controllability, in other words, we know what we're doing, we have the ability to control our own destiny, and it hasn't been taken away from us, or perception-wise, we don't take it away from ourselves. And then there's trust, trusting the people that you're around and trusting your safety. And then relationships that were so important, that when somebody has a breakdown in a relationship, how it can mentally affect them as well. And then of course, the last one, which is purpose. Those 5 things are really important for an individual to be able to navigate through, the ups and downs and be resilient and kind of in a stress-free, environmental safe area. The trouble is we have a lot of changes that's been happening. In the last 5 years, you think about, the COVID and the pandemic and all the changes that happened there. And I can't think of anything good that's come out of that change at all, right? There might be a couple little things, but I mean, it just destroyed a lot of people, especially in the mental health side. And then there's other changes as well. If you look, it depends on what your point of view is, but the elections that we've had, in the last, year and so that's been going on, and these massive changes and stuff, and what's going on. And, I mean, depends on your point of view, that could be good or bad, okay? There's one change that kind of stays on my mind a little bit, even going right now, but it was all good. And that was the change of the Detroit Lions. Yeah. Awesome, yeah? So they're fun to watch, it's been great. Anybody that's been a season ticket holder for a long, long time. In fact, I remember asking a long time season ticket holder at this event, I've been a season ticket holder for 35 years. And I said, why? I was just curious, right? Why? And he goes, well, good question. He said, well, we have 35 years, and really what happens is, we come around a year, are we going to get him again this year? And the thought is, if we don't get him this year and they go to the Super Bowl, we're going to hate ourselves for the rest of our lives, right? So let's get him one more year. So I thought, man, that's a heck of a way to sell tickets, right? So get them because this could be it. Otherwise, you don't want to hate yourself. But so season ticket holders, awesome, it's been great. So when I think about mental health, in fact, how I got involved, my picture of mental health or mental fitness, or actually fell in the category of mental toughness. That's what I thought mental health was. If you're tough, you can get through anything. You can be resilient. But it's always a physical thing. And I learned that really the guidelines for, and we learn most stuff, when we're young, growing up, from people that are around us, or maybe there's a mentor or something. And the same was that for me. So in high school, I had a coach that came in, a new coach my junior year, and he came in. He called everybody into the gymnasium, and he said, here's how I'm going to run this team. And he gave us a long list of rules. right? So here's this long list of rules. But he also gave us the consequences to those rules. So if you drop the F-bomb, then you're going to do 15 push-ups. If you do this, then this is what's going to happen to you. If your grades drop at all, then you're going to do your homework here in my office, after school. So he had these long lists of rules, right? And the consequences go with them. But he said, if you follow these rules, you'll have one other consequence. You'll win. You know what? And he was right. We got together, we all buzzed our hair short, and we came together as a team, and we went to the playoffs my senior year. Awesome. Because of that, I got a scholarship offer to Utah State University. I go to Utah State, and sure enough, after my freshman year, we get a new coach that comes in. And he comes in, and he calls us all into the auditorium, and says, here, I'm going to run this team. I've only got one rule. In fact, I really don't have any rules. I just got one rule, though. And that's the do right rule. That means you're old enough now to know the difference between right and wrong. Okay, so I'm just going to ask you to do what's right. If I say be there at 7 in the morning, you be there at 7 in the morning. You might not know what the consequences are. There will be one, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'm just depending upon you to be responsible for yourself and to be there. Do what's right. You know what it is. And that was great because that gave me, responsibility maybe from the first coach I had, and this ran along with it that I make the choices. I get to choose if I'm going to do this or that. Before, knowing the consequences was a way to learn that. And these come at different times when you need them, right? So learning that, and then learning this, and then of course I got drafted by the Detroit Lions. Get here in 1980, a long time ago, and sure enough, Coach Monty Clark was our head coach. My first training camp, we're in this big room when he starts talking to us, and he starts telling us about how he's going to run a football team. And he says this, he goes, you guys are all professional now. That means you get paid for what you do. That means not only are you responsible for yourself, but you're also responsible for you're the face of this club, this organization. So we expect you to do what's good and act like a professional. But I don't want you just to be a professional. I want you to be a passionate professional. Be passionate in what you do. Because that passion is what gets you to make you win. And he was right. I became the starter my second year in the league, and that was awesome. My first start was on Monday Night Football against Chicago Bears. Yeah, it was awesome. I threw 4 touchdown passes, and I ran for 2 touchdowns. It was a hell of a night. It was a great evening. In fact, I almost thought football was easy. After standing in the muddy end zone, I threw a 94-yard touchdown. I didn't throw that far, but Leonard Thompson, our receiver, caught it, and he was fast and took off. And he scored a touchdown, he crosses that end zone, and I'm standing on this end zone, and I just hear 80,000 people just go nuts. And I was one of them. Yeah, and I ran down the field. Oh, it was so cool. Well, I became the starter. I started for like the next 6 years after that. But as time went on, we ended up going through 3 head coaches and 5 offensive coordinators is what I went through in those 10 years. Every other year, you have to learn another offense. And it's not, these offenses aren't the easiest thing in the world, especially terminology, and you have to kind of learn the differences and what goes on, but that's what we were doing. The thing is, I was named the MVP after that my first starting year. And so, how do you reduplicate that? How do you keep that going? Well, I was good. We moved on, and sure enough, the coaching changes, some injuries started happening to me, and I started getting kind of, I guess the best word to use it is the imposter syndrome. I don't know if you know what that is or not. Yeah, it's where you start doubting yourself, like, I don't really deserve to be here, even though you have. But you start feeling that way, and all of a sudden you start kind of hedging back, and so you quit taking chances anymore. You start trying to protect the position. In fact, anybody that challenges the position, you try and undermine them. So you just think, so you don't take, like I said, you don't take chances. You're not as aggressive as you used to be. It's about protecting your position. And so what ended up happening was as that went on, and then I started getting injured. I broke my hand in '87 in training camp, so I'm out for the year. And then I came back the year after that, got my starting job back against San Francisco, and I broke my ankle, so I was on injury reserve again. So I came back, we had another coaching change, offensive coordinator and head coach. So I came back my 10th year, and I remember at this point in time, I wanted to get my starting job back, but I felt like I had something to prove. And so the imposter syndrome is setting in on me, right? I'm just going to break out. So when I got my starting chance against Minnesota, I decided, well, I'm going to do it my way. I want all control as much as possible. I've got to prove it, but I've got to control everything. And so I told him I'd call my own plays, and I did. You know, and it's interesting because, I threw 3 touchdown passes, but it was one for us and 2 for them. And by the end of the third quarter, they pulled me and they benched me, and they cut me the next day. And so that was the end of my football career. I loved it. It was fantastic, 10 years, and I have no complaints whatsoever. Except when you are cut like that and you're released, there's another major transition that happens. And it gets kind of yanked out from underneath you. And one of the big things that happens to us, well, not just us as professional athletes, but I'm talking about anybody that has an identity of like the job. Maybe they wear a uniform. Maybe there are a lot of people report to them. Maybe they own the business. Maybe it's, whatever it might be, that identity, it gets yanked out from underneath you instantly. And so trying to figure out who you are is not an easy thing to do. And you lose your support system. The things that you had around you, people, that worked as a team. You don't have a team anymore. You're outside. And one of the things that's really painful, and I've talked to a lot of people in retirement or as an executive step down or even as an athlete, one of the hardest things to do is, after you're not playing anymore, is to watch the game on TV and see your team go on without you. I thought I was important. I thought they really needed me. And you realize you were just another person in the machine. And you're going, wow. And so it really kind of shakes your identity a little bit. Now, the Lions have been great with their alumni, and so I have no complaints. In fact, we put together an alumni group. We actually have a peer-to-peer group that we put together 10 years ago where we reach out to we reach about 800 alumni on a monthly basis. We're keeping tabs with them, make sure somebody leaves the game, they got somebody to keep in touch with. So to me, that's where it was at. But this cut, this thing happened, I was going through it. Well, I thought, starting new would be the answer, and so I went and started a business. It was in the insurance agency, and didn't know anything about it, didn't know anything about the car business, and that's who my clientele was. And so trying to feather my way through that, but you know what? I was pretty good at it, and pretty successful, and before I knew it, I was making more money than I actually did when I played football. And not only that, it was, as the thing grew, we were like #1 for GE Capital, which was, in Michigan. And so this is great, but then again, that thing hit me again, that cycle, of the imposter syndrome, where all of a sudden, is this it? I'm going and talking to people, I don't really know what I'm talking about, but I'm getting deals, you know what I mean? So, and so the money was there, but it was just, I felt like, is this it? And I just felt disconnected. I didn't feel like, my identity was still shattered, right? And so what happened is, it started going downhill. So I quit going out on calls, people had a business, so they were making calls and stuff. But it started slowing down. Of course, the business suffers when it does stuff like that. And, I couldn't really define what was going wrong with me. I just didn't feel good. And so I wasn't going out anymore and doing that. Well, I was going to go on a business trip, and so we're in the car heading for the airport, and I'm with my wife, and she's driving the car. And as we're getting closer to Detroit Metro, this overwhelming sense of just, I can't do this, kind of set into me, and I just felt, can't do this. And the closer we got, the more that, so I wrote on a napkin, had a pen, and wrote, "I'm sorry, I love you," and I handed it to my wife. When she looked at it, and she looked at me, and I jumped out of the car. We're going 75 miles an hour when I jumped. So, bam! I was very lucky and very fortunate. The cars behind us didn't hit me, and I ended up on the side of the road. I don't remember any of this part of it, right? Other than the fact that my wife wasn't very happy. This is what you can imagine. But I woke up in the hospital, and they'd already done surgery on me, so that, I had, bandaged up and stuff, some skin grafts and some, fixing certain things. And I woke up and all bandaged up, and there's a psychiatrist standing there, and he's talking to my parents who flew in from California, and my wife, and saying, we got this program, we can do this, we can evaluate them. Stigma, no way, that's not going to happen. I'm fine now. You just jumped out of a car. I said, yeah, but that's over with. And so it's done, okay? I'll put my blinders back on and go forward. But I told my parents, if you sign any paperwork, I said, I'll never talk to you again. They didn't. So that's just, the power of stigma. So I went out and put, my blinders back on and just started going down that pathway again like I was, and, and still working. And then, but I didn't learn anything, and that's the problem. Because when my 15-year-old son started having the same symptoms that I'd had, and then I started, didn't know exactly what to do with it. I just knew he was suffering. And then, of course, they went downhill, and he was 15 years old. He was captain of his freshman basketball team. And pretty soon he wasn't eligible to play basketball because his grades got low enough. And I could hear him at bedtime, at nighttime, being stirring around and stuff. And just all the way he held his mannerisms was going on. And so on Saturday, 6 in the morning, and I kissed him goodbye, and I went on, had to go to Vancouver. So I flew. And it was the next day when I got the phone call from my wife, and she said, Jeff is dead. He died by suicide. And when you hear that, it's so surreal that just a big scream that just comes out of, way down inside. I took an emergency flight and came back, and I went to the morgue and looked at his body. And right there it dawned on me that, the things that I had thought about, like suicide, right now just removed. I can never think about that again. Because the pain is so strong for the survivors, the people who were left behind, it's so painful that I would not do that. But what do I do about the pain I'm feeling now? Right? So I just decided to be numb. And so I had lots of tools. Alcohol was, always been fun in my life, but I started using it for a totally different reason. That's just to be numb. Anything I get my hands on, prescription pills, I don't really care what it was. I just want to be numb. And I was like that for about a year. And then I got picked up on a DUI. And got arrested, ended up doing some jail time. And I remember, jail's no fun, okay? But I remember being in there going, oh God, they all know my name. This is like terrible. But what I noticed was there's nobody in there that had any responsibility whatsoever. It was always somebody else's fault. Oh, this happened to me because of that. This happened to me because my dad was an alcoholic. This happened to me because of the cop did this. And it was always somebody else's fault. No responsibility at all. And listening to him, and all of a sudden it dawned on me, am I one of those? Am I that guy because I'm here because my son died? That's my excuse? And I decided, man, I do not want this to be his legacy, and I do not want it to be mine. Not only that, I want some answers. I want some answers as to what happened with him, what happened with me. What was the deal with my mom when we were growing up? My dad would say, your mom's not coming out of her room, she's having one of her spells. What is that about? And so I ended up going to a place called the University of Michigan Depression Center, and got some treatment myself. But they had this little education program, and so I started attending that and went through this education piece, a little mini medical school on depression and on mental illness. And I started saying, so they have a name for this thing. Oh, and this is what it is, and the symptoms and everything else is. What an eye-opening experience, right? So I went down the pathway of starting to, how do I save people? They ended up hiring me as a outreach coordinator. And I remember the first day I showed up, I said, okay, so what's my job? What do I do? My job description. I don't know, you tell me, you're the outreach coordinator. I went, oh, I really had a carte blanche to kind of do what I wanted to do, just make a difference. Wow, that was pretty cool. And I reported to the head of the department. So I started doing that, hard to reach programs for populations like men, professionals, and something that was my main target to start off with. And we've done a lot of good in that area. One of the coolest things, over an 11-year period, I worked with the Navy, going out to all their bases and away and on both coasts here as well, and doing suicide prevention with them. And so I got to see a lot, got to learn a lot, and that's what got me into the veteran world and starting to work with veterans, because that same thing happens to them when they come back and leave, right? That transition, and they lose all their identity and everything else as well. So those programs, I was really settled in on those things. So I've done that for quite a while, but one of the things that always bothered me was the fact that why are we always waiting until something happens before we can actually treat somebody, or get to them? Why not be way in front? Why not go way out in front of and be upstream, so we can be mentally healthy, mentally fit? So maybe these things that when the transition happens, or, the things that send us down a negative pipeline don't happen because we're informed about it, or we're waiting for it. So that's where we're at. And sure enough, that's what I've been doing. I started doing it with Blue Cross Blue Shield as well, and about anybody, the programs that I get a chance to work on. And there's three major things I'm going to leave as takeaways with you that I found that can be really upfront in this mental fitness piece, right? And so one of them is to understand what the imposter syndrome is, right? And it's called conditional self-acceptance. That means when you set of conditions for yourself, or whatever they might be. And it could be in domains of, financial, it could be looks, it could be anything, right? Performance. You set a condition that I have to be perfect. I have to do this. I have to look a certain way. I have to be this way. And if I can't meet it there, I'm just beating myself up. Okay. In fact, you know what? There's a little exercise with this. It goes like this. Close your eyes for a second. Okay. And imagine that something that's important to you, and you screw it up. Okay. You fail at it. What do you tell yourself? What's that inside mind speak? What do you tell yourself? Okay. So maybe it was like, I'm an idiot. Why do I do that for? I'm a loser, right? I mean, it's those things that I'm so dumb. I mean, this is me talking about my golf game. That's why I get nervous when I show up at Indian Wood Country Club. I start getting nervous going to my golf game. But that was it, okay? But now, with your eyes closed, think about this. Think if you've got a really good friend, and they screw up at something, okay? And they fail at something. Okay, now you can open your eyes, okay? What do you tell them? It's a little bit different than what we tell ourselves, isn't it? Yeah, because we're supportive. It's okay. You got another shot at it. Just call this a learning experience. It'll be all right. And you're there for them. We're not calling them names or anything like that. And I thought, why is it so different the way we treat ourselves, the way we treat other people? Because we don't give ourselves a break much. Because we're stuck on that conditional, trying to be perfect and trying to be that. And so that's conditional self-acceptance. The trouble with that is I might have a goal, that's fine, but once I reach the goal, I'll stop. Because I reached it, and I'll try and predict it now. Okay, I don't want anybody else to get up here. Okay, so that's conditional. So the other side of that deal is unconditional self-acceptance, and that means that you remove the condition, and now all I do now is I want to think about learning and growing. I don't worry about, I accept my goods and the bad. So I'm full acceptance of my, minuses and pluses, good and bad. That's me. I'm a human being. But it means I don't have to judge myself either, though, because I'm free now to go beyond. So if I do have a goal and I hit that goal, I'll just keep on going because I don't care about, I made it. It doesn't matter. In fact, even competition will get better. And a competition with maybe it's a fellow worker or somebody else in your community, or somebody that you're vying for. Who's got the best, yard, whatever it might be, right? But instead of trying to undermine them, I will go, yeah, let's go, because the better he is, the better I'm going to be, because it challenges me. And so it's all built on this growth and freeing yourself up so you can think of the possibilities and solutions, not the negative self-talk that beats us down. And then, of course, the last thing, which has to do with a little bit with motivation, because I can pump somebody up, rah, 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 we're going to go get them, okay? But how long does that last, really? Does it last until the event's over with? Does it last maybe a few days? I don't know. But if you really want to be motivate on every day, you have to come from inside. It's got to be intrinsic. It's got to be in here. And that means it's something that sparks you in the first place, sometime, somewhere. I remember I was doing this thing for some teachers they're starting the school year, and they asked me to come in and talk to them, can you do some motivation things? Mm-hmm. But instead of going, you're going to have a great year, I started talking about this piece of it. It's got to come from in here. And I asked the question to several of them. I said, why did you get into teaching in the first place? And their responses, were like, well, because I had a bad teacher, and I didn't want to have anybody else have a bad teacher, or I'd be around for my kids when they come around. I had a great teacher, and I just saw how it affected me, and I want to be just like that. And so they go back into the thing that really drove them, and again, that's their purpose, And so we go back and get intrinsically. The thing is, though, it opens us up to a growth mindset. That means growth mindset means that when I wake up in the morning. Okay, my first number one goal is to learn something today. I want to grow today. I want to learn something. And so it's a life of learning every day. What can I learn today? And so that means when I come across problems, I don't fight them. I don't, run away from them. I take them on because I might learn something in this, today. And so it gives us the freedom to move forward. And I guess if I can just stay in that mindset as long as possible, you get to stay in the flow of actually doing something on a daily basis that's meaningful, it means something, and it also means something to you. And one of those consequences is a good one, means that it's actually affecting somebody else as well in a really positive way. So I hope we can stay in that mindset. I guess the best way to describe it would be this. If we think about a toddler learning to walk, okay? What do? They fall down a lot, don't they, right? But that doesn't matter. They'll get back up again. They'll fall down. They'll back up. They'll look, for like, not support. They'll look to see how people are doing it so they can learn from them. And maybe they'll grab onto the desk. They hang on to it. That's okay. They need some stability. They need a little support. That's okay. And they'll take some more steps. Boom. But sooner or later, they get more steps and a little bit more steps, and maybe they're going down the hallway because it's a little further way to go. And as they're going down the hallway, mom and dad are down there going, "You can do it. You can do it. Yay!" Right? The child doesn't care. It's a great support, and they like it, but they're not doing it for them. They're doing it for themselves, so they can grow, and so they can go someplace, and they can be something. So, we get stuck sometimes and think about that. If we can share that on with somebody else, find your passion, but also be there for them, because one of the best gifts you can give to somebody else, especially somebody that you care about, is your own mental health, because the more mentally healthy I am, okay, that means that if I need to do something about my mental health, if I need to go talk to somebody, I'll do it, because I want to get on this fitness side. I want to do the things that are right to keep me mentally healthy. See, mental health doesn't mean that if you have an illness, you can't be mentally healthy. It just means there's something you have to do about it, okay, and you can still be healthy, because it has nothing to do with that. I know so many people that have, diagnoses, including myself, that are pretty mentally healthy, because they do things they need to do, they have the right heart, and they share, and they give, so. Thank you very much for what you do. Spend some money, okay, because it goes to good places. And I really appreciate and thank you very much for the invite and for sharing.